Tiana is also asking, will this great presentation be available? Absolutely. Hillary will make an announcement for this publishing workshop. We'll have a digital community space, and all the resources and upcoming events and community connections will happen there, and it's part of alumni platform. So that's really great news. And after Hillary opens the meeting, we'll have Dr. Pauline Albert, our fielding alum, make a few remarks, and then Jean-Pierre will take over, and we'll also make function of our chat, not during the presentations, but in between, to keep sharing resources, feedback, and ask questions. And it's 9:30 now, so I'm going to give microphone to Hillary Molina, Director of Alumni Relations at Fielding, to take us to the next step.
All right, Elena, thank you so much. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, where everybody is calling in from. My name is Hillary Lynn. I'm the Director of Alumni Relations, and it is an absolute pleasure to be here with all of you and be a part of just an incredible opportunity for alumni, lifelong learning, scholar practitioner opportunity right here, and with just someone who is absolutely incredible and at the top-notch level of so many things when it comes to publishing. And I'm just thrilled to be here. We have some information at the very end of the session about how you'll be able to access resources. So you have to wait to the very end to hear this. Yes, this is being recorded. So what I'll do though is I'm going to get started and would like to introduce to you really the one who got this whole process started and had the vision for what you will be hearing today. And I would like to introduce to you Dr. Pauline Albert. She's a former executive. She's a writer, researcher, teacher, and organizational specialist. Dr. Albert is the curriculum director of the Padua program at Franciscan Media. Dr. Albert holds a bachelor's degree from Emory University, an MBA from Wharton School, and a PhD in Human and Organizational Systems from Fielding Graduate University. Dr. Albert is a generous supporter of Fielding, and we are so grateful for her continuous engagement with our university and community. Dr. Albert, thank you.
Thank you, Hillary. Thank you, Elena. Thank you, all of you, for allowing me to take a couple minutes of a really important workshop to tell you about the background on the Jean-Pierre Isbouts Endowed Fund for Lifelong Learning. And then a very brief introduction of Jean-Pierre, as most of you know him, and his many accomplishments. When I was a Fielding student, I loved it, and I knew that I would likely stay part of the community. But honestly, I didn't expect to become a donor. I thought that I was paying so much for this PhD. Why would I need to donate back to Fielding? I had donated $100,000 to get a PhD. However, I realized shortly thereafter what a responsibility I had to pay it forward and to make sure that our extraordinary faculty and their legacy was honored and continued at Fielding, because I wanted others to have as rich an experience as I had had. So this is actually the third endowment that I have started at Fielding. And the idea is to get something rolling associated with a vision and then invite others to participate. So there are really two agendas associated with this endowment. And you are participating in the first, and that is to expand the vision and the reach of Fielding Publishing, for us to be able to publish more extensively the brilliant dissertations of so many of our students in a format that is accessible to the world. Jean-Pierre started the press in 2013, and he's been running these workshops for over 10 years, trying to help students to do that translation that needs to happen to make the research more accessible. So I'm really pleased that Jean-Pierre was willing to stay engaged in this kind of work. The second part of the vision for this endowment is to really expand people's knowledge of Fielding and its commitment to lifelong learning. While on a recent trip to Egypt with Jean-Pierre and other Fielding people, I realized that half the people on the journey were not Fielding graduates. They were friends of Fielding. So how might we expand this friendship and dedication to lifelong learning to a broader audience and make people aware of the richness associated with experiential learning from a master teacher like Jean-Pierre? So the second part is doing more traveling and getting more people engaged who are not necessarily degree-seeking people, but people in the world who are also interested in expanding who they are and their knowledge. So Jean-Pierre is this master teacher, and you're very aware of his many publications. He's a writer, a teacher, a filmmaker, a musicologist. We're just really privileged to have him in our midst as an emeritus faculty, and I'm very privileged to be able to call him my friend. What's interesting is I like calling him my modern day Da Vinci. However, I realized from studying Da Vinci that Jean-Pierre finishes things, and Da Vinci didn't do a very good job of that. So Jean-Pierre is somebody that when he commits to something, he puts his all into it and he sees it through. So you can read the title of his many publications. I followed his work before I ever came to Fielding, and he's both brilliant, but never arrogant or cocky. And I just find that for somebody to be that smart and not impose it on others is really a demonstration of what a kind, generous person he is. I also think his willingness to share his time. He has many, many opportunities, and his willingness to stay engaged with Fielding is really a gift. So this whole notion of lifelong experiential learning is really a gift to the world that Fielding can further extend. And like a doctorate, it's a gift that cannot be measured really in dollars and cents, but it's a love of learning, it's a love of life, and it's a love of wanting to make the world a better place. So with that, I turn it over to my friend, Jean-Pierre.
Well, thank you so much, Pauline. I'm blushing because what can I say after such a wonderful introduction?
I don't know quite it is. The Bell Road is going to be wall, slow moving traffic. So.
Okay, at this point, I think it would be good, since we have a lot of people on the line, if we could all mute ourselves and turn our video off. That would be great. So we have maximum bandwidth for the story that I'm going to tell. And then, of course, you can post questions in your chat screen as we go through the presentation. It'll take the first part. I would like to take you some ideas about writing, argumentation, and specifically developing a book proposal. We will stop for 5 minutes after the first hour, take a little break, get some coffee, get some tea, and then we will look more closely at how you draft a book proposal about your dissertation. And then, of course, we'll have lots of time for Q&A, because I'm sure each of you has lots of questions about your particular dissertation, what you need to do to get this published. So I'm going to share my screen at this time and the presentation that I've put together for you. I assume everyone can see this?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
So this is part of the endowment that Pauline so kindly initiated and now has multiple sponsors. And of course, we encourage you to join the endowment as well. This is one of the outflows of this endowment. And my goal is to take you through the various steps of turning your dissertation into a published book in 4 seminars. And if need be, that will continue next year as we get a new batch of PhD graduates into the mix. But as you can see, today we're going to talk specifically about the essence of writing and the essence of argumentation, which may not always be the same thing that you did in your dissertation, but which you need to do as part of creating a book based on your dissertation. And we will finish with creating a book proposal. So I encourage you, if you are serious about publishing your dissertation, to take a yellow pad or anything where you can make notes. This presentation will be posted on the forum, as Hillary will show us, at the end of this presentation. But we're going to cover a lot of information. So it might be good to have a pencil and a yellow pad in hand where you can make notes for yourself. So the outcome of this seminar is we're going to make a book proposal. And as Hillary will tell us, we now have a wonderful platform, thanks to her creativity at the Alumni Association, where in between these 4 seminars, you can post work, you can post questions, we can start a community conversation about how to publish your dissertation. The target for proposals, book proposals to Fielding University Press is May 1st of this year. However, as we will discuss, there are many other possible outlets for your book proposal. In fact, there are many ways to publish your dissertation. I'm sure you thought about it. You could write a series of podcasts. You could do a video documentary, as some people have done. You could write an article in a scholarly journal. And I've given seminars on how to do that. The reason why we're not going to talk about creating an academic journal based on a journal article based on your dissertation in this series is because there are multiple challenges to creating your dissertation as an article in a journal. The most important things, of course, if you are, as part of your career, if you're pursuing an academic career, if you are an assistant professor or an adjunct professor, then it is very important for you to have as part of your CV an article or several articles in a peer-reviewed journal. And I'm sure you're doing that already. The challenge that you will have in doing that is that there is limited space in current bona fide journals today. I'm sure you're getting emails, which I'm getting too. Everyone is getting emails who's ever been near academia, of so-called journals that are offering for you to publish an article in their journal. In many cases, when you get these emails, it is actually somebody working out of a garage in Bangalore, and it is not a bona fide scholarly journal. I mean, I got one email the other day that said, if I submit an article this week, then they will guarantee it'll be peer reviewed the week after and published by the end of the month. I mean, obviously that is not a bona fide scholarly journal, and they typically charge you as much as $600 or more to do that. So those are scams. You want to stay away from those. There are, however, many good journals. You know that as part of your literature review, you read them. You know the journals that publish on your topic, on your dissertation topic. But as I said, again, space there is limited, particularly for newly minted PhD graduates who have yet to build name recognition. Very often, these journals will look for collaborative articles, that is, articles that are written not just by one author, by a group of authors. You can still do that if you want, of course. You can team up with your professor, with people on your committee to do that. And another challenge is that if you do submit an article to an academic journal, very often that journal will not allow you to submit it anywhere else while it is under review. And that review could take anywhere from 6 to 9 months. And even then, if it's accepted, typically there will be feedback. I know because I serve on the board of one of the humanities journals. Once it's accepted, there will typically be feedback from the peer review. So there you go back, spend a few months there. So by the end of the day, it'll take somewhere between 18 months to 2 years to have your article published in a journal from the moment that you actually submit it. I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. If you are, again, on an academic track, it's very important that you do that. But this series is specifically about creating a book. With a book, you control your destiny. You control your destiny. The whole process of publishing a book is entirely under your control, and working, of course, with with the publisher that you're working on. So this series is designed for 3 outcomes. One is you submit your book proposal that we will be creating this morning to a publisher that you know of, that you aware of their particular genre. You may have books that you read for your dissertation that were published by that particular publisher, a publisher in your wheelhouse, let's say. You can do that. That's number one. You can just submit a book proposal to a publisher. 2, you can submit a book proposal to us at Fielding University Press. Our deadline is May 1st. We have a limited amount of slots, but we are looking for new publications. So I very much look forward. If you want to be published by Fielding University Press, we look very much forward to your book proposal. And 3rd, you may want to publish independently. And that is becoming a very, very great opportunity today. And now you really control the whole process. There are a number of companies that can help you to publish your book and get it out on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and all these other, and as an ebook for relatively modest sum of money. We will discuss those options at the end of the series when we actually have a manuscript conceivably. So on December 3rd, 2022, that's at the end of this series in December, we're actually going to look at other ways to publish independently on a whole variety of platforms that allow you to do that very, very cost effectively. And then, of course, you control that process. So these are the 3 outlets that we're going to looking for. You submit your book proposal to a publisher that you're aware of, that publishes in your genre, in your particular subject area. You submit a book proposal to Fielding University Press, or you just decide to publish independently. All those 3 things we will cover. So on May 28th, which is the 2nd installment of the series, we're actually going to talk about the nitty-gritty of inverting your dissertation into a book. I'm going to explain to you in a little bit what that means. Nothing to be afraid of. You can certainly do it, but it should be clear to everyone that the structure of your dissertation is not something that lends itself to a book for the general marketplace. And then in August, in our 3rd workshop, we're going to take you through the steps of actually creating a book. What does it take to create a book? From the moment that you have a manuscript, and we'll talk a little bit about how to create a manuscript, all the way through publication. What is that process? And there are many, many steps there, including promotion, which is going to be a big, big issue. And then finally in December, as I said, we'll look at ways to get your book published in any number of ways. And throughout this process, we're going to be communicating with each other. We're going to, again, use Hillary's wonderful platform. We will talk about that at the end of this presentation. And so we will be in touch throughout the year to help each other to get to that point. Here is a screenshot from that wonderful online platform that Hillary created, Publishing Workshop Community. And so that's how we're going to be communicating. This is also where Hillary will post the recording of this presentation, in case you want to go back. I will post the slides that we're going to be using this morning on this platform as well. However, it's always good to sort of keep track of your own notes. I've learned that that's what I do. I keep track of notes as we go through these presentations for better attention. Now, as a faculty, some of you, or many of you I know, I've seen some names that I'm not familiar with. So these people probably joined after I retired from Fielding in 2020. I've been with Fielding for 17 years. I was one of the founding members of the media psychology PhD program at Fielding. And then in 2010, I joined HOD, because even though I'm a filmmaker, which is why I got involved with media psychology, I'm at heart, I'm a humanist. I'm a human development person. And so in 2010, I joined the human development program before my retirement in 2020. And along the way, I really tried to involve my students in publishing, even before they were graduated from the program. The first book we did in 2012 was an encyclopedia that National Geographic commissioned me to write, an encyclopedia about all the characters in the Bible, which sounds like an insurmountable challenge. But these wonderful people, and I think Raquel is on this call, helped me to do that. And the book is still out there. It became a bestseller, by the way. Who's Who in the Bible? Beautifully designed book by the artists at National Geographic, and 6 of my students worked with me on that. Then after that success, National Geographic asked me, well, can you do a story about Christian civilization? 2,000 years of Christian civilization. And again, I reached out to 6 of my students and we worked with them. And they helped me to cover the huge amount of information that was required in terms of literature and art, and science, music, history, politics. All that is contained in this particular book. And then they said, can you do something different? How about something more of a novelistic approach? And Random House asked me to do a book called 10 Prayers That Changed the World, which is not a Christian book. It has Jewish prayers, it has Hindu prayers. And so I was very upset with this cover, which suggests that it's only about Christian prayers. It's actually prayers of a whole wide variety of cultures. But anyways, I had these 4 people, Patrick McNabb, who may actually be on this call as well, work with me on this book. So it's very important, if you are joining this call as a student, not yet as a PhD graduate, there's no reason to wait until your PhD graduation or your EDD graduation. I mean, encourage your cohort, encourage your faculty to start publishing now. There is absolutely no reason to wait until the end. And Kim Cantagiani is on the call, Michelle Elias is on the call. They worked with me on what is my most challenging book, which may now be reissued under a slightly different title, adapted to the COVID age, The Scientific Evidence for the Afterlife. And when you open that book, the first page, you see their names printed, the students printed, because they made a tremendous contribution to this book in terms of all the various scientific ways in which we can show that there is actually a post-mortem, a continued existence of our consciousness. Anyway, if you're interested in that, The Search for Heaven is the goal. And finally, I also did a film with students. I'm not sure you're familiar with that. I was commissioned to do a film about Valkyrie, the plot to assassinate Hitler. Tom Cruise did a motion picture, as you may recall, and he was not able to get the cooperation of a number of German organizations in doing so because of his connections to Scientology. So a group of investors came to me and said, I speak German, I'm obviously an academic as well as a filmmaker, and they said, can you make a film that would engage those organizations? And these wonderful people that you see helped me to do that. You see Janet Demerode here. This is a picture she took at the National Archives in Maryland, where she's going through reels and reels of World War II footage, including color films shot by Eva Braun, Hitler's mistress. Unbelievable material. So students can make an incredibly important contribution to publishing projects. And I always encourage my colleagues to, in their publications, to do so, to involve your students and to learn, so to show them how to get involved with publishing. So why now do we want to publish your dissertation? I have found that once published as a book, your dissertation can serve as your launch platform for your career in whatever field you've chosen. It literally can be a rocket that can lift you there. A book gives you a credibility that no other platform can give you. An article in a journal, a blog, podcasts, these are all wonderful things, but having a physical book that's out there gives you a solid foundation for your career, wherever it may take you. And of course, let's face it, you slaved and labored on that dissertation for many, many, many months. And we don't want it to gather dust on a shelf, right? Yes, it's been published in ProQuest, but let's face it, ProQuest is not necessarily the premier outlet for your dissertation research. By publishing it as a book, a whole new audience can read your research, can access to your expertise, and it can truly launch your career platform. And just to give you one example, in 2004, I had this crazy idea of writing about the Bible, not as religious material, but as historical material, just as a historical document, and to place that in the context of the geographical, social, political, cultural, economic context of the centuries before and after the Common Era. And my agent went all over New York City pitching that book. In those days, publishers were still living in New York City, and they all rejected him. I can tell you how many reject letters I got, until National Geographic said, you know, it's an interesting idea, you know, we can live with it, but you know, we don't typically give a huge book to one academic. We usually have a panel of academics who does a book like that. And Peter said, I'm sorry, he's not going to do that. He's either going to do the whole thing, he's not going to do it. And then Geo said, well, then have him do a book proposal, which is the subject of this seminar. And I did a book proposal. I did a book proposal along the lines I'm going to show you in a few moments, and added 3 chapters. The whole thing came to about 100 pages. And long story short, they published a book in 2006 called The Biblical World. It is now one of their top selling books in the history of National Geographic. It's now in its 4th print. It's been published around the world. In fact, last year when I was shooting a film series about Vincent van Gogh, I found I was in a gift store in the depths of the Provence in France, and they had my book in French. And I told them, hey, I wrote that book. They didn't believe me. I had to show my ID to tell them. And that book has now launched my career as an author. These are just a few of the titles I've since published. I'm now working on my 26th or 27th book. My last book for National Geographic is The Ultimate Visual History of the World. We'll talk a little bit about that in a little while. It just came out in October. So what I'm trying to illustrate is that a book can launch your career, can make you visible to the audience at large. And that's why it's so important that we go through that process. Okay, so here we're going to ask a few questions. Okay, these are some things that you want to scribble down and reflect on, think about in the days ahead before we actually start doing a book proposal. What new and unique insights has your study produced? Now, it's funny because I've been involved with, I don't know, 70, 75 dissertations during my time with Feeling, and I warn my students always that at the FOR, I will ask that question. and still many during the FOR go like, well, I said, but you know, this is the essence of the matter. You've got to be able to express in a concise manner, what is it that your dissertation has delivered that we didn't know before? What is that unique contribution to human knowledge? What is that? Can you encapsulate that in half a page? And very often, you know, when you come to the end of a dissertation and conclusions, you know, I miss that. And I said, well, tell me very briefly in an elevator speech, what is it that you found that we didn't know before? What has your work contributed to the academy? So that's the first thing we need to get a grip on. Very, very tight, very, very concise. And then the second question is, who would be interested in reading those findings? If we know what it is that your dissertation contributed, then ask yourself, well, who would be interested in that? Those are two cardinal questions that you have to consider before we can start talking about publishing your book. Who now would say, yes, that's something I need for my practice. That's something I need. I will benefit from reading those insights. That's the first thing we want to do. What is the gems? What are the gems of your dissertation? And the second thing we have to understand is that a dissertation is a kludge. It's hopeless. You know, I found this picture, all these wires bundled up, because that's really what a dissertation is. And it's not your fault. It's our fault as faculty, because we were lazy, and we need to know when we ask you to write a dissertation is, can this person create a comprehensive literature review? Can this person create a methodology, a strategy? Can this person summarize and report out data, new data, primary data that that person has found as part of his or her research? And most importantly, can you then make sense of that data in a discussion? And because we need to answer all of these questions, we ask you to do that separately, right? We ask you to dedicate separate chapters to each of those tasks. Well, that works for a dissertation, because now as a committee, we can say, okay, she's done this, she's done that, she's done that. But it does not work for a book. It does not work for a book, because nobody is going to open up a book and start with 50 pages of lit review. I mean, some people are going to say, oh, forget that, right? So that is the challenge that we're going to do. And I know you can do it. I know you can do it. You are a master of this material, all this research that you've gathered. We just have to completely repackage it in a way that will make it publishable. So to publish your dissertation, and this is the most important thing for you to remember, to take away from this session this morning, you must recast your dissertation as a new, fresh, and compelling linear narrative. That is the mission. Should you accept this mission, right? That is what we have to do. That's the work that needs to be involved in order to make your book a success. Okay, just that's the inversion process, I call it. So you have everything there, your lit review and all your data and all that stuff. Now we're going to have to write a book based on that material. And I'll show you a little bit how we're going to do that. At the same time, you must translate the ideas, the findings that you have created, into something that is valuable for real world practice. At Fielding, we typically live in a theoretical world, and it needs to be, because so much of our research is based on theory. But when you write a book, you want to apply that theory to practice. You want to give your reader takeaways that, aha, I didn't know that. I'm enriched because of that. That's what we want to do in our book writing, right? We want to make sure that we can create an entirely new experience for our reader. And so those are the two most important things that I want you to take away from this. I mean, am I going to make the time to rewrite my research as a book that people will want to pick up and read and continue to read and say, wow, at the end of when they finish the book, wow, I've learned a lot. This is going to enrich my practice. This is going to enrich my organization. This is going to enrich me as a person, as a leader in my organization. That's ultimately what we want to accomplish. And so you can ask, well, what is a compelling narrative? I mean, you know, how do you do that, quite frankly? How do you make a compelling narrative? That's kind of a tough thing to do. No, it really isn't. And I compare it to 50% craftsmanship, and 50% art. You know, when Michelangelo created the David, if you've been to Florence, or if you're going to join us on our trip to Florence in September, we will see David both in the Accademia as well as in a copy in front of the Palazzo Vecchio. And Michelangelo always said that he didn't create sculptures. What he did is he cut away the excess marble in order to liberate the figure that he had in his mind from the stone, to liberate it. And I think that's what writing is about. On the one hand, it's craftsmanship. And on the other hand, it is truly art. And can you learn that? Absolutely, you can. Yeah, you don't have to be, I mean, some people are born writers and other people have to learn it a little bit, but we can do that. It's definitely possible. Let's take a look at what that craftsmanship involves and what the art of writing involves, okay? So craftsmanship means that you have to be in command of the language. It's that simple. Just as Michelangelo had to be in command of the craft of cutting away, of chiseling away marble, you must be in command of the English language, which means that there has to be zero tolerance for spelling, syntax, or punctuation errors. You know, and it's funny because English is not my native language. You know, I was born in Holland, and until I was 26, I never wrote more than a postcard in English. And it's really when I came to Columbia in New York, and when I started to write my dissertation, that I actually had to start to write English as a written document. And so you have a leg up, because for you, English came in with your mother's milk. I mean, you must be in command of your language. And I think maybe because it is your native language, I have seen many dissertations that are not very well crafted. They may have brilliant ideas, but they have sloppy punctuation. In many cases, students don't really know what punctuation is, quite frankly. They have sloppy syntax, you know, plural for singular, singular for plural, a mix of past tense and present tense in the same page. And these are all very common errors. And we need to be sure that once we're going to publish a book, your dissertation committee may have said, oh, wow, it's okay. A book publisher will not. So we need to be absolutely focused on our craftsmanship. And in craftsmanship, I mean that this language has to be clean. It has to be polished. It has to be absolutely pure to convey the ideas that you want to communicate. Now, fortunately, you have something that I didn't have when I wrote my dissertation back in 1979, which is Grammarly.com. And I'm sure many of you are already familiar with it. You can pass your manuscript or parts of your manuscript through Grammarly.com, and it will point out things that are correct or not correct. There is also such a thing. This is called a book. I'm not sure if you can see it. It's called the grammar book, the little grammar book. Oh, it's actually called the only grammar book, sorry. The only grammar book. And it's a tiny little book. You know, it cost $9 on Amazon. And it's a very simple, handy, look it up guide to, gee, when I have quotes and comma, where does the comma go? Does it go inside the quote or at the end quote or after the end quote? Silly little things like that. It's important because publishers look for that, particularly in a book proposal. I mean, all right, let's face it, when you submit your manuscript, every publisher will put your manuscript through a copy editor. I mean, we do the same thing at Fielding University Press. We give it to a copy editor. So obviously, when you submit a 60,000 word, 70,000 word manuscript, of course, there's going to be a few spelling errors here and there, some syntax issues. That's okay. But in your book proposal, your book proposal has to be clean as a whistle. My my literary agent, Peter Miller, he passed away last October. I was absolutely devastated. We went to New York. We flew to New York just for the day to attend his memorial service. And there were so many people there. He was a mensch. He was a true, a great person. But he always said that, you know, you must be able to create absolutely clean language. You must be able to control, be in full command of your expression. So that is the craftsmanship that we must bring to bear on this process. But what about the art? Where does the art come in? For me, the art of writing is storytelling. It's that simple, folks. It's storytelling. And I know that when you write your dissertation, you don't have time to worry about storytelling. And, you know, where pieces don't quite fit because you spend months on doing various things, you know, your lit review and your methods and all that stuff. You know, these are individual chunks taken in time. They're not a cohesive narrative, but that's what we need to do. Storytelling. You know, as a writer of many books, I have times when I got stuck, many times, in fact. There's nothing worse than a blank screen with your cursor blinking at you. You know, you're going to start your manuscript. What's the first word? What's the first sentence? Of course, we all have that. I have found a trick that always works, and it's this. Neurologically speaking, the part of our brain that controls our writing is different from the part of our brain that controls speech. Did you know that? There's a different part of the brain that handles the writing from speech. And what I do is I sit my long-suffering wife down and say, let me try to explain to you what I'm trying to do. And in articulating verbally what it is I'm trying to do, I suddenly see what it is that I have to do. Because by storytelling, you find a way to stitch the various ideas together. Suddenly it starts to make sense, which is why, as I wrote in many of my books, storytelling was the principal container of information for the first thousands and thousands of years of humankind, long before there were books, and even long after there were books, in terms of tablets or papyrus scrolls. People still relied on storytelling to convey information. The Ramayana, Hebrew scripture, the Iliad, and the Odyssey, these are all stories, but these stories contain data. They contain information about the culture from which they emerged, right? So well into the 19th century, until finally literacy rates rose to the point that up to 60 to 70% of humankind, at least in the West, could read. Until the Industrial Revolution, there was only about 20% of people who could read. After that, as part of the Victorian age, the revolution in education, that changed. But up to that point, most people exchanged information through oral testimony, through oral means. So we have to go back to that. We have to tell a story. I don't care. I mean, put your dog down. I mean, we have a dog. She's a yellow lab. And if Kathy's not available, I put her down and say, let me explain to you, Katie, how I'm going to do this chapter. And poor Katie, of course, I have a bone in my hand, but well, then listen to what I have to say. Because again, by articulating verbally what it is you want to do, you can suddenly see those links that you couldn't see while you were trying to write it. So find a writing partner, whether it's your partner, whether it's your dog or cat, doesn't matter. And use that trick to verbalize what it is you want to do with your book. That is the art of storytelling. The other part of the art of writing is creating a logical narrative. As I said before, one of the main problems I always see with dissertations is that there is no connective tissue between chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, or even within the chapter itself. I see the narrative suddenly jumping to an entirely different subject. There is no transitions. And so there is no logical thread. There is no logical thread, no foundation. And that's what we need to think as writers, as book writers. We need to imagine that, you know, these readers of ours, they're following the thread, the crumbs that we are leaving. And that thread must be consistent. It must be logical. It must guide them through all the different phases that we want to take them through. But they cannot lose sight of that thread. So you have to make it easy for them. You have to create smooth transitions. Now we're going to talk about this. Now we're going to talk about that. And hark back to what they have read before so that it is consistent, so that they go with you. They walk with you as you tell your story. It has to be a consistent, logical narrative. And the other thing is, always remember that you're having a conversation with your reader. You know, sometimes when I, as my managing editor role at Field University Press, I get manuscripts and they're swollen language, right? Sentences go on for a page or more, right? With 5 or 6 or 7 subclauses. I send it back. I said, you know, you don't need to impress your reader with all kinds of swollen language. That's not scholarship. That's not scholarly writing. Scholarly writing is talking about very complex ideas in very simple and transparent language. The issues that you're going to be writing about are complex enough. So let the language be a mirror, a glass pane through those particular ideas. Don't try to artificially make things very, very complex. You're having a conversation with your reader. And so, well, of course, the language has to be clean. It has to be also accessible. You know, I have lots of reviews for my books, but one review that I cherish is a review I got from the librarian at Columbia University, my American alma mater, who reviewed Who's Who in the Bible, actually. And she said, Isbouts has a way of making very difficult, complex information very accessible to the general reader. That to me is the greatest compliment I've ever gotten. And you have to aspire to the same thing. Don't make it convoluted, or what I sometimes call constipated language. You know, these long sentences that you don't end, and midway you kind of lose track of what is the verb, but what is the subject. Write in simple and straightforward language so that you're having a conversation with your reader. Let's talk about what the art of writing is not. The art of writing is not about trying to impress your audience with all those things you read. I've seen that a lot in dissertations. You know, you get these huge, you know, literature reviews, and then I read this, and then I read that, and I said, and my feedback to my students at that point is always, I couldn't care less. I said, I couldn't care less about all those books. What I'm interested in is which of the books that you've read actually affected your research question. I said, that's what I'm interested in. I said, don't tell me all those. This is not a book report. I'm not interested in a book report. I'm interested in those and only those literature references that actually made you think about your research question, that actually affected your thinking about your research question. Those are, now we're doing a literature review, not a literature report, a literature review. So if you use your literature, and you must, of course, but only use the literature that has direct pertinence to the story at hand, the story you want to tell. We're going to talk a little bit more about that when we get to scholarly argumentation. It's also not about giving your readers a complete inventory of your qualitative data. some qualitative data, which is the primary way in which we do business at SLS in psychology, and some of you are coming from psychology, it's quantitative data. And so in the first 7 or 8 years of my serving as faculty at Fielding, most of my dissertations that I chaired or was involved with were quantitative. And ever since I moved over to human development, it became qualitative. Doesn't matter. In both cases, you wind up with heaps and heaps and heaps of data. And of course, you want to present all that because, hey, listen, you worked hard on it, right? You worked hard for it. So you want to show it to make sure that you understand it. I did all this work. See how much work I did? We're not interested in the work as such. We're only interested in the data, whether quantitative or qualitative, that directly supports the story that you want to tell. So don't try to impress your reader with, oh my God, look at all this. Don't overwhelm them. Just use literature there where it counts, okay? It's not about copying and pasting from a dissertation. Sometimes when I get a manuscript and I see, the text doesn't flow right. It feels like pieces from a jigsaw puzzle, but the pieces don't fit. And what happens is that the person in question has actually been just copying and pasting pieces from a dissertation, particularly in the first years of Fielding University Press, when we published books where students could write a chapter based on their dissertation, and then we typically had faculty to put it together in a monograph format. And I read those chapters, and it just, when you read it, you couldn't get through it because you would hit these obstacles like, oh, wait, all of a sudden we're in a different style, we're in a different mode of writing. And it's because the student had been copying and pasting from a dissertation. It went straight back. I said, no, you have to write it afresh. You have to write it and rethink it, rethink the meaning of everything you found afresh as a new and integral piece of storytelling. And that's what we can publish. So writing is taking your reader on a journey. That's what it is. Writing is taking your reader on a journey to a better understanding of the human condition. You see what I'm saying? And so that's why you have to write your book from the beginning. Of course, you're referring to your dissertation for the research material, for the data, but you have to rethink your book from the beginning as a journey. I am going to take you on a journey about leadership in organizations, for example, right? And the story that I'm going to tell you, I'm going to show you some things that you may not have thought of as it pertains to the way you lead your particular organization, and so forth and so on. That's how you have to conceive of your book. It is, you're taking your reader on a journey, an exciting journey, a journey of discovery. And along the way, you're going to find things, hopefully, that the reader was not aware of. Writing is about persuasion through clear and convincing argumentation. That's it. It's argumentation that tells the story. So when we talk about writing a story in terms of your book, we're actually talking about argumentation. And if there's one thing, if I had a magic wand that I would like to change at Fielding, is that so often we're so focused on theory and not enough on argumentation. I wish we could just spend a little bit less on theory and more about applying that theory in a real life discussion. Now, right now, I'm doing a new series for the great courses. I've done 2 series so far for the great courses. I'm working on a new one, which, God willing, we will be filming in Israel starting in April. It's about the historical Jesus. And one of the points I made is that the Pharisees were actually very much sympathetic to what Jesus had to say. I mean, they were arguing with each other and they were arguing with Jesus, but the point is they were doing that because they actually thought his ideas had merit. The evangelists don't understand that. they think they're having a fight. No, they're not having a fight. They're arguing because they're into argumentation. They're into arguing, applying the Torah to everyday issues in life. And when you look at the Gospels that way, all of a sudden it gets an entirely new dimension. That's what we're doing. We're doing argumentation. Now, what is the art of argumentation? It's presenting an idea based on tangible and pertinent evidence. That's it. That's my definition of argumentation. How can you get an idea across like a prosecutor in a courtroom, convincing a skeptical jury? What will a prosecutor do? The prosecutor will tell a journey. He will tell a story. He will tell a story to the jury. And as part of that story, the prosecutor will use Exhibit A, Exhibit B, Exhibit C, right? That's exactly what you're doing. That's argumentation. So you're telling a story about your work, and you use your data as Exhibit A, Exhibit B, Exhibit C, and so forth and so on. What is that evidence? Well, first of all, yes, it is the literature. So as you write your story, from the very beginning and through the very end, you bring into the discussion pieces of literature that you think are particularly pertinent to your story, that boost your story, that supports the thrust of your story. We call that secondary data. That's material in the literature, but you have to do it in a critical fashion. Not all the things that you read in the literature is pertinent. You know, I have a clipping here on the wall of the New York Times a few years ago, did an analysis of psychology studies, and they found that somewhere between 62 and 65% of psychology studies typically done among undergraduate students, because these people are lazy, right? I have a captive audience here, so let me do a study of my students. We're false, we're skewed, we're biased, we're not pertinent to the condition at large in society. So we have to be very critical and skeptical when we read literature. You have to put your critical thinking hat on. And what I tell my students always is to try to organize literature around your subject in different perspectives, in different schools of thought. Just like in ancient Judaism, the school of Shammai and the school of Hillel. That's the same thing you do. Organize your literature in different schools of thought, and then contrast those schools of thought. And now you're working as a true scholar. Now you're working as a true scholar. I'm working on a book right now. In fact, I will post a chapter from that book on the community forum that Hillary has made, in which I go against the grain of virtually all the literature that has ever been published about the Mona Lisa. And I show them why they're wrong. And you have the courage to do that, because that boosts your credibility as a scholar. And not only that, it's an exciting story. It's a thriller-like story. It's, oh, wow, I didn't know that, right? It gets your audience involved. Of course, then you have probative information from your oral testimony, your qualitative or quantitative data, whatever it is. We call that primary data. But one thing that I always encourage students to also do as the third component of your evidence for your argumentation is what I call just-in-time data. And we don't do that enough at Fielding. Just-in-time data are source or contemporary documents that happen as it happens. The George Floyd phenomenon, for example. It will take some time before we see scholarly journals printed in journals, scholarly articles on that phenomenon. And yet there's a whole host of broadcast reports, of newspaper articles, of magazine articles that happen as it happened, And I believe that this is just as valuable data as your typical literature or your qualitative interviews. Let's forget, if you do qualitative interviews, those are self-reports. They're somewhat biased, and literature is often years out of date. I've seen dissertations that use literature dating back from the 70s, which is when I wrote my dissertation. Couldn't show you how old I am. So just-in-time data, don't ignore that. Okay, if you are writing about a topic that is in the news or has been in the news, capture that, save that, read those newspaper articles or blogs, anything that's been published digitally, broadcast, or in print, because that's how you can demonstrate to your publisher that your book is here and now. Your book is here and now because look, you're capturing the information as it happened. Just-in-time data is so incredibly important. So that's the trifecta of evidence that must support your argumentation. We're going to stop in a few moments and give you a little break. But before I do that, I want to show you a little illustration of how I did that with one particular problem. In 2017, by chance, I came across a very remote abbey in Belgium, which had a life-size copy of The Last Supper. Here you see me with Father Ivo, who is the curator of that painting. It's in a remote abbey. Very few people know about it or even go there. And in the literature, it was, most literature doesn't even refer to it, but some literature referred to it as a copy of the late 16th century. Well, I don't want to call myself a Leonardo expert par excellence, but I know the artist pretty well. And I detected some elements in this painting that I thought could very well come from Leonardo's workshop itself. And so I had to do that to a highly skeptical audience, which does not believe that this work came from Leonardo. And I used the same trifecta of data to do that. On the one hand, I did, of course, a major literature review. This is just a few of the books that wrote about Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper painting in Milan. And only 2 of those books had a glancing reference to the canvas that I saw in the Abbey of Tongelro in Belgium. So the literature wasn't really very, very helpful. In fact, it was hostile to whatever I was trying to do. Then I launched on a search for primary data. I went to archives in Florence. I went to archives in France. I went to archives in Belgium. And based on the source documents from that era, including letters written by the King of France to the Signoria of Florence, I was able to reconstruct how this painting actually originated in Milan and made its way via France to this remote abbey in Tongelro, all in the 16th century. And when I presented those results, even then, my community of scholars was skeptical. They said, no, Isbouts has an interesting story, but it doesn't really hold up. So then I reached for my third just-in-time trifecta data. I engaged, and Feeling was I used part of a support grant by Feeling to do this. I engaged 2 laboratories to do a multispectral study of the painting. Multispectral studies allow you to look underneath the paint layer. They allow you to see what is underneath the upper paint layer, what's underneath that on the gesso, the drawing, the underdrawing, the cartoon, whatever it is, pieces of restoration. You can all see that. And so the two separate Belgian laboratories, we conducted the multispectral examination of this canvas. And we found, first of all, that when you overlay elements of the painting on the original fresco, it's a perfect match. Well, that can only be done through mechanical means. The human eye cannot create such a perfect match. There must have been a common factor, which we call cartoons, which are these designs, life-size designs. So I was able to demonstrate by comparing digitally the Tonolo and the Milan paintings, that these were created from the same source, the same cartoon, and one. And two, the X-ray ultraviolet spectral images showed that whereas most of the images on the right, for example, were painted within the cartoon outline, as you can see very clearly here in the nose of Bartholomew, that one face ignored the cartoon and basically painted in freestyle. I was also showing that because of the multispectral images, this dark matter is the result of restoration efforts that were done in the mid-1950s, not very well, but that by and large, the face was completely intact. And I was able to relate that to sketches that Leonardo did for Leda and the Swan, and thus gave proof that the painting was painted by artists in Leonardo's workshop, and that the painting of John, right here in the middle, was painted by Leonardo himself. And when I was able to show that information, we had a press conference in Tonolo, which was packed with television and newspaper people, and the NBC television actually sent a crew out to Tonolo, and here you see me on the scaffold in front of that fresco with Keir Simmons, the NBC foreign correspondent, and that feature aired in December of 2019 on the Today Show. Now, I can't guarantee you that your dissertation will get you a feature on the NBC Today Show. But what I can guarantee you is that your dissertation will put you on the map. So primary and secondary evidence should not be isolated. It should illustrate your argument from the very beginning of your story. We're going to stop for just 5 minutes. If you want to give a little stretch, maybe run to the bathroom or get a cup of tea, as I will. We'll continue in exactly 5 minutes at 10:42. And brewing. Oh, thanks, Kim. The book is $3.95 on, I guess, in used format on Books. That's great. That's great. All right. So where are we in the story? Let me pick up the story here. Oh, yes. So let's talk a little bit about the style of writing. I always believe in seducing your audience. Now that sounds a little funny. I mean, you don't just seduce anyone. I mean, it's not that type of writing, but it really is important how you start your book. This book, Mapping America, which I wrote with a collector of ancient maps, very, very expensive old maps, Neil Asbury. I wrote this book, Mapping America, and I wonder how am I going to start this book? And I was really, you don't want to just go in there and talk about cartography and all that stuff. You have to seduce the reader into getting hooked in your book, getting hooked. And so I decided to start with the last hours of Sir Walter Raleigh. Raleigh was one of the great explorers for Queen Elizabeth I, who discovered New England, founder of Jamestown. That didn't go very well, but in any case, the reason why I start this story almost like a novel. His last hours before his execution, he was executed by King James because he was jealous of his relationship with Queen Elizabeth. And so I imagined what it would be like for a man to lie in his cell hours away from his execution. What would be going through his mind? And I used, of course, a lot of historical references and eyewitnesses, reports that have survived. And so that's how I hook the reader into the story. And to think about that, how do you start your story? You could tell a wonderful anecdote from one of the people that you interviewed, maybe a wonderfully moving story that one of the people told you about as you interviewed them. You can talk about the way you were got involved in the subject of the book, but start with something personal. Start with something that connects with people emotionally. And then you can go and do your scholarly stuff, okay? But it's very important, because not only do you have to seduce the reader, you have to seduce the publisher who is going to publish the book as well. So that's just a little tip, another tip. You know, the way you start your book. When I go in a bookstore, I always read the first page. If the writer doesn't get to me on the first page, I put the book back. It really is true. I'm going to give you a few. So get ready with your pen and pad, because I'm going to give you a few books that I think you should read, nonfiction books that do that. Books that I open it up, and right from the first page, I was hooked. That's what we're trying to do. All right, let's continue here, because I want to leave time for, oh, here it is. So here are 4 books that I would recommend for you to read. These are nonfiction books, but they tell their story so incredibly engaging that you really feel part of the story right from the beginning. And at the top is Michael Dobbs' King Richard, Nixon, and Watergate. Now, I lived through the Watergate era. I remember it very, very well. Not many of you may, but you're hooked right from the first page. So that's something that I urge you to read. I mean, learning to write is about reading. That's how I learned to write as a person. As I told you, I didn't use the English language until I was 26 in a doctoral program at Columbia University. And I overcame that handicap by reading. I read voraciously. Typically I read 4 or 5 books a week. Not all, I don't finish them all at once, but I read voraciously. I want you to, to make a point of maybe one night in the week where we don't watch Netflix, where we don't go to Amazon or Hulu. Make one night of the week where you just read. And nonfiction, good nonfiction, is going to get you into that rhythm. The rhythm of writing well is what you can do here. Ian Toll, Twilight of the Gods. My God, talking about nonfiction book as a novel. It's thick, it's this big, and it's about the Pacific War. You may not be terribly interested in the Pacific War, but you are sucked into that story right from the beginning. You see yourself there on those carrier decks as you try to get a P-47 ready for action against the Japanese, and the wind is blowing through your hair, and the prop is turning, and the flag goes boom, and the plane roars off the carrier deck. I mean, you're there, right? You're there right from the beginning. So that's great. Eric Larson, Dead Wake, the last trip of the Lusitania. Now, if you go on a cruise this year, I recommend that you don't read this book while you're on a cruise, but it is a really wonderful book. Now, I thought long and hard about the 4th book, and I feel very awkward about recommending one of my books, because I don't want you to feel compelled to buy any of my books. And in fact, it was either that or 10 Prayers That Changed the World. But I do think that this book will be helpful, Ultimate Visual History of the World, which just came out last October, because I had to cover an enormous amount of different topics: science, literature, politics, social development, culture, art, geography. And so chances are you will find a chunk of text in there that can help you to write your work. That's the only reason why I recommend it, not because it's such an incredible piece of writing. I think it's pretty okay, but because of its incredible range of topics, you may find something there that can use as a model for your book. So these are the 4 books that I would recommend that you read, and keep reading. While you write, keep reading. I do the same thing. When I write a book, I really read a lot to stay in that groove. One other quick tip I'm going to give you. Once you start to write your book, and it will take a few pages for you to get into what we call the groove. Some people call it transportation. Some people call it the writing space. But as an author, we all know what we're talking about. About 20 pages in, suddenly you find your rhythm. Suddenly it goes easier. Suddenly the ideas flow from your brain through your hands onto the keyboard. Suddenly you're in the groove. It doesn't happen right from the beginning, but it will happen, and it will happen about 20 to 30 pages in. At that point, you have to keep writing. You have to keep writing, even if it's just an hour or 2 hours a day. But once you find your groove, once you find the unique rhythm, the flow of your writing style, you gotta keep at it, because if you don't, you will lose it. Okay, so once you start, make sure you carve out an hour or two, preferably more, but at least an hour or two out of the day, so that you don't lose that flow. You don't lose it. The only day is Sunday. I don't work on Sundays. On Sundays I go out and play with my grandkids, but 5-6 days a week. Otherwise, it'll be very difficult to go back and find that groove. Okay, that's just a tip that I have found. We're going to talk about the book proposal very briefly, and then we're going to open it up for questions. So the book proposal. This is the book proposal that you will do if you're going to pitch your book to a publisher that you know is publishing books in your genre. If you want to propose a book proposal to Feeling University Press, and even if you want to write a book yourself as an independent publisher using any of the companies that we're going to be talking about at the end of this series. For all those three outcomes, it is very good that you first now write a book proposal. And here is where the topics come in. So, scribble this down on your drawing pad. Before you do anything, ask yourself, what is your book about? It goes back to what I said at the very beginning. Try to try to articulate the unique insights that your dissertation produced very concisely. This is 2 or 3 paragraphs, not more. Okay, as concise as possible. What is your book about? What unique insights does it offer? And this is important for your publisher. Why is it different from all the other books on the subject? We call that in the business, we call that the comps, the comparables. Okay, so these are 3 things you have to address on the first page. What is your book about? What unique insights does it offer? And why is it different from other books that you have read as part of your literature review? Why is it different from other books on the subject? And you may list 2 or 3 books that are similar to the subject that you're talking about, but at the same time, you tell them why they're different and why your book is different. Okay? We call that the USP. USP stands for unique selling proposition, the unique selling proposition. Second, your audience. Who is your audience? Who's going to be interested in your book? Who's going to buy your book? We want to know that. And don't say, anyone from 18 to 65. I've seen those. Yeah, right, everyone. No. Obviously, these are practitioners, leaders, any people who are active in the profession that you are writing about. But that's okay. But then you have to also say, what is the essential takeaway for those readers? What will they learn that they didn't know already? What is the takeaway? Okay. Again, we're talking about brief paragraphs. We're now on page 2, not more. And we're not even done with page 2. Be very concise, because publishers have the attention span of a nanosecond, right? So be very, very concise. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, what's the essential takeaway? Qualifications. What qualifies you to write this book? Well, you're a PhD or an EDD. Okay, that's good. But is there anything else that qualifies? Have you worked in this area for a long time? Do you have organizational experience? Have you worked in this sector? Do you have actual experience? Have you published on this topic before? It goes to my point earlier that you shouldn't wait until your dissertation before you start to publish articles. You know, my gosh, right now, you guys have opportunities that I never had when I wrote my dissertation in the late 70s. I mean, there's academia.edu, there's ResearchGate. There are so many ways to publish as a scholar even before you get your degree. So make use of that, okay? And then marketing. This is page 3, very important. How should this book be promoted? Which journals, magazines, or other periodicals will be interested in reviewing your book? This is important because, let me tell you, little surprise here. I have published with the top publishers in the industry: National Geographic, Random House, Disney, a whole bunch. And each time they say the same thing. You're the one who's going to do the promotion, by the way. I mean, they will send the book to reviewers and stuff like that. I mean, that's what they do. But they insist to this day, today, 2022, every publisher, including Field University Press, will insist that you do the promotion as well. So put some ideas together of how you think you are going to be promoting this book. Are you going to write podcasts, which is very, very important, you know, about the book? Are you going to do blog? Are you going to do video? Are you going to be prepared to do a special event like a Facebook Live, for example, which we've done several of those at FUP. So that is very important, that you convince the publisher that you are prepared to invest your effort to make the book a success. You know, when you deliver the manuscript, a lot of people think, okay, now I'm done. No, that's when the work continues. I don't want to say that's when the work begins, but the work is not done when you deliver the manuscript. You have to be invested in the success of your book right from the beginning. And the publisher is expecting you to do that no matter what. If you independently publish, that's also true, because no matter how you publish, with a foreign public, with a publisher, with FUP, or you yourself, you will always need to invest in your own personal promotional efforts. It doesn't have to cost money. It doesn't cost money to make a blog or to do a video for YouTube or Vimeo or any other. Heck, I just did a 3-minute video on TikTok. I've never done that before. Boy, what an awful format. Ugh, everything is vertical, you know. But I did it because that's what the publisher expects me to do. And then comes the second part. The second part of your book proposal is your title. Titles are very important, you know. Titles are critical. So think long and hard about the title that you want to give your book. And I've seen people come up with long titles, you know, as if it's an article. You know, in an article in a journal, you can make a long title. In search of leadership, a new study investigating the blah, 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 right? That works for an article. Let me tell you something. It does not work for a book title. A book title has to be concise. It has to be absolutely tight and short. The Search for Heaven. History of the world. So make sure that you put in your mind what that title will look like when people walk by it in a bookstore, if there's still bookstores in your area, or if they see it on Amazon or wherever. That title has to reach out and grab you, right? So don't make it long. Keep it short and tight. You can always do a little subtitle on the bottom, but the real title is extremely important. I can tell you stories of books that I pitched that didn't go anywhere until I changed the title, and then it was accepted. Same book, same manuscript, different title. So a title is very, very important. Then you do it in outline. This is how I see this book breaking out. We're going to talk about that in our next seminar in May, when you actually start writing your book. Right now, we're just focused on the book proposal. So an outline, which is really your table of contents as you envision it, the table of contents, and a brief one-sentence description of each of those chapters. What do you cover in each chapter? Okay. And of course, what we don't want to see is introduction, literature review, methodology. I hope we've understood that now. We need to start from chapter 1 with the story that you want to tell about your dissertation. Your proposed word count, usually somewhere between 50,000 and 70,000 words. When you think you'll have the manuscript ready, which is very important. And finally, if you have it, a sample chapter. Sample chapters. So this is a summary, and you can take a screenshot of this slide right now on your computer, because this is the most important slide. This is what you're going to do. If you are going to make a book proposal for another publisher, for Field University Press, or anyone else, this is what we want to see. Okay. A overview, what is the hook, what is it about, why it's unique and special, a market analysis, who will read this book, comparative works, promotion, what you will do to promote the book, what qualifies you, a brief author bio, brief. We're talking about no more than 3 pages here, folks. An outline up to this point. We're talking about no more than 3 pages. Page 4 is the outline, your table of contents, and the brief description of what each chapter will do. And then if you have it, the sample chapter. At FUP, we don't require it because very often you haven't started writing yet. If you submit this book proposal to a publisher other than Field University Press, you should add a chapter or 2. Why? So they can see your writing style, so they can assess, what you as an author, what the art of writing is all about. If you can articulate an idea, if you can write in a persuasive fashion, if your writing is smooth, all those things. If you pitch to a publisher, you want to, again, at FUP, we don't require it, but most other publishers will. So if you're going to pitch to a publisher that you happen to know that works in your field, we do want to see that. This is your book proposal. That is the story, folks. And again, I want to thank Renee at Gandolfo, Helen and Fountain Literary Management. We were talking with each other about them taking me on as an author since my agent passed away. I actually am signing with another agency, which they will announce soon. But anyway, I want to thank Renee for giving me this wonderful overview of what a book proposal should be about. And I think I have come to the end of my story here, and we can start. Remember one thing important. You are no longer pitching to your dissertation committee. Remember, when you write your book proposal, your dissertation committee was very familiar with your subject matter. And so, when they talk about certain authors, they know who you're talking about. That is not the case with a publisher. They probably don't know anything about the subject. Well, hopefully they do a little bit. So, but remember, your pitch is different because you're trying to sell an idea to a publisher who may not be as familiar as your committee was, but you do ask them to invest in a property that is yet unknown. So it's a leap of faith For a publisher, it's a leap of faith to say, I'm going to take this author on. And remember that, remember that. Don't be discouraged if the response is a no. There are many, 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 many publishers in the world today. There are tons of publishers. And we will cover that again, as I said, at the end of this series, when we look at all the many, many ways in which you can publish your dissertation. So if you submit a book proposal and the answer is no, that doesn't mean that you're going to have to run to your bedroom and collapse and cry yourself to sleep. It means that, okay, well, there are many other ways. Well, thank you very much, but there's many other ways in which I can publish this book. And so no matter what, if you are committed to publish your dissertation as part of the series, I guarantee you, we're going to publish your dissertation one way or another. We're going to find a way to publish your dissertation. That's my promise to you. That's my pledge to you. Okay? So if you get a no from a particular publisher, that doesn't mean it's the end of the road. It means it is just one more step in the process. Deadline, if you want to pitch to FUP, is May 1st, 2022. And with that, I'm going to stop my presentation and ask you, are there any questions that I can answer at this time? And don't hesitate to speak up.
Well, nobody said anything, so I'll be first.
Okay.
This is Susan. Thank you so much, Jean-Pierre. This, of course, is wonderful, but there are so many things that you have shared with me over the years about writing, and we won't even talk about improving my writing, but just about taking advantage of my work and creating different stories. One that you might not have shown here is we were talking about, somebody wanted me, I present my research all the time, and I was talking about writing, doing articles. And you told me, well, don't give them everything at once, because they're going to tie your work up for a long time. So you have a number of ideas here, break them down, and you can get lots more out of the work you've done. So thank you for that, because that's what I'm going to do with this book. I'm going to take one section, and it will be an incredible something I think that people will really want to, that will be exciting. But I want to ask, what should we expect? What kind of support should we expect from a publisher? What do they do besides publish your book?
Very good. That's a very good question, Susan. Thank you. And we're going to talk about that in August, I think, in our third workshop in detail. But let me give you a little primer. What's happening after you submit your book proposal? And so that's your challenge class. Your homework is between now and May to put together a book proposal, whether you're going to submit it to Field University Press or any other publisher, so that come our next workshop in May, we can talk about that. Feel free to post your proposals on Hillary's alumni website so we can all take a look at it. If you're comfortable with doing it, you don't have to, but if you're comfortable doing that, we can all take a look at it, maybe give some feedback, But once a publisher says, yes, I think we're going to publish your work, then the first thing that's going to happen is there's going to be a review. That's true with Field University Press. It's true with other publishers. They're going to review and they're going to give you feedback that says, I love chapter 3, 4, and 5, but chapter 1 is it's not really gelling for me. Can you go back and do so? There's going to be feedback. In fact, I'm going through a process right now where a publisher gave me feedback and I had to rewrite some things that they thought was not quite clear to the reader. So be prepared to invest at least a month or two to accept a publisher's feedback and to rewrite the manuscript. Typically, that is at least a month, more likely 2-month process where you say, okay, I'll do that. And then you submit it back to the publisher. And they may at that point say, okay, they may say, it's much better now, but how about this or that? So it's a cycle. It could happen once or twice. Once the publisher says, okay, that's it. At that point, we lock the manuscript and we begin to work on it. And the first thing is we're going to give it to a copy editor. A copy editor is going to run through the manuscript and just catch things that have to do with poor syntax or spelling or whatever. A copy editor may very well say things like, you know what, this paragraph doesn't make sense to me. I just can't get through it, and make a comment. And then at the end of that process, the publisher will then send you that document, say, will you please take a look at the comments from the copy editor? First of all, make sure that you agree with all the changes that she or he has made, but then answer these comments. That's the copy edit process. And that's a long process. With National Geographic, copy editing and then proofing takes 3 months, 2 to 3 months on average. I tend to be very quick in my responses, but of course I don't control what the copy editor is doing. Once that's done, some publishers, including National Geographic, may do a fact check. That's because they're now part of a large they didn't used to do that, but they're now part of large organizations who are all concerned about legal liabilities, so they do a fact check. We don't do that at Fielding University Press. We rely on the fact that your dissertation went through a process called a dissertation process, that we expect that most of those issues were addressed at that time. Once we have a copy edited manuscript, you can take one last look at it. One last look. And after that, it's goodbye, baby. And then we lock it. That means that there are no changes can be made at this point, because now the heavy burn starts. The heavy burn in terms of we're now investing in artists to take your manuscript and lay it out in book form. Typically, we use, and most publishers use, Adobe InDesign, which is a sort of a dark art. I've tried to figure it out. I can't. It's very complex. But we have wonderful artists who know how to do that. And they create this in the beautiful book spreads, with illustrate. We love illustrations, by the way, illustrations and all that good stuff. That process is another 2 months because everything has to be laid out. And then once that's done, you take a look at it. We call those galleys. These are galleys in PDF form. But we don't want any changes unless something happened in the meantime in the industry or in the profession that you're writing about. Something happened that you really absolutely totally must update. Then in some cases we will make an exception, but only very, very rarely. Because let me tell you something, a little secret. Art designers are the worst spellers in the world. So if at this point you make changes, I'm like, oh my God, artists are the worst spellers in the world. So, I prefer not to do that, but in some cases it must be. Once we have the InDesign format, it then goes to 2 ways. It goes to the publishing team that gets it, formats it ready for it to be printed in proof copy, and the other at the same time, the same work goes to the engineering team that works on the ebook. And they're going to invert that process using magic arts that I don't understand, and they create an ebook format. So the outcome of both of those is a printed proof copy and an ebook. Those go through review processes with the publisher. We have a distribution agreement with Amazon for worldwide distribution of all of our books worldwide. And including now, there are printing presses all over Europe, which has been very, very helpful. So many of our FUP books are now printed in printing presses in Europe, in Asia, in Japan. And there are plans to broaden that even further. So we've seen an uptick in our foreign sales, which is very, very helpful. Many publishers won't do that. And so that's a little competitive advantage we have. They'll just do the North American marketplace. And if they see an interest from a foreign publisher, they may sell the rights, but that's a different story. We'll go into detail more about that in our seminar in the fall, but that's very briefly the process, Susan. Okay, any other questions?
Yes, I have a question, and this is Merlin. People call me Merlin as well. Thank you so much, by the way, for making me aware of this. Excellent, excellent. So I have published, so I've written and published an unedited, uncensored version of my book. And I just put that out for friends and family, sent it out to everybody. It's, again, full of typos and all that stuff. But it's, you know, kind of out there. I'm working on the second edition, getting it copy edited, trying to get a developmental editor to look at, like, do these ideas flow together? Does this make sense? And I've already seen a lot of movement that has to take place. So my second edition, which will be edited, cleaned up, is almost going to be another book, but is loosely based on my dissertation. And my biggest concern that I've run into is, outside of getting it edited and all that, is getting it out to people, getting it marketed. And I know you mentioned blogs, Facebook Live, and some other things. Are there any things that you have found, like on the ground type stuff, because you have so many years of experience with this, of just getting it into people's hands? Because that's kind of what I want to, just get it into people's hands, get it out to people. I have an ebook and a print version of the unedited version, which won't be available after the cleaned up one is out there.
Right.
So do you have any like feedback?
Yeah, Leonardo, that's a very good question. I have found personally, as an author, that what I can do, I mean, the most, let me start with it. The most important thing that you should do is get reviews. Reviews are the most powerful way to get your book out there. I mean, Mapping America, a book that was published last year in April, did some good sales until the New York Times decided to review it, which I was very happy to see. And you can see on BookScan, you can see that the thing going up. So I'm not saying you're going to get reviewed by the New York Times necessarily, because that's difficult. But any review is very important. So you can do that. A publisher will do that for you. But if you independently publish, as you are, you can look at the literature review, identify journals that you've read that talk about your subject. Go to the website of those journals, see what their submission rules are. All of these journals, they want to review books. That's their job, right? So find out who is the contact to submit your book. Write to that contact and say, I would like to submit my book for review in your journal. What is the process of doing so? Sometimes that's already clearly specified, and then you just do what you want to do. You send them a PDF. Sometimes they want a print copy. Most of them right now will accept an electronic copy, always PDF, never Word document, always a PDF. And so that is the most important thing, Leonardo. It is reviews, number one, reviews. The second most important thing I have found is podcasts.
Podcasts, okay.
Podcasts. I'm unbelievable. I couldn't believe it. I mean, when National Geographic did a reissue of In the Footsteps of Jesus last year, they said, can you do a podcast series? I'd never done a podcast series before. And I did it as a video. I decided to do it as a video. I'm a little bit more comfortable with video than with audio. And you would not believe the rates I'm hitting. I put the video, it was a six or seven series podcasts, each about 30 minutes long. I used images with PowerPoint. I didn't use text. I used a PowerPoint with images and my video in the top corner, and hundreds of hits per week, week. So you have it in your power. These are things I didn't have in the
Yeah.
70s when I said with my publication being published on microfiche, right? I didn't have, you have so much power at your disposal to promote your book. You just have to be smart about it,
Yeah.
And so social media, Twitter, that hasn't happened. I mean, at one point with my co-author, we invested into a PR program, which cost us $10,000 to publish the book on Facebook and Instagram. We had all of a sudden, 20,000 followers, but nobody bought the book.
Yeah, I've encountered that. Yeah.
So social media, YouTube, yes. Vimeo, yes. Those are the things that you want to concentrate on. I see. Go ahead. Yes. I see.
This is
Sandra had a hands up. Sandra.
Hi, Jean-Pierre. How are you?
Very good.
Thank you, by the way. Thank you.
So my question is, as you know, my dissertation was 2 years ago now, January, 2 years ago.
Yep.
And I'm wondering, and with the pandemic, my area is online faculty. And so many people, everybody went online last year and the year before now. And I'm just wondering how much of what I did back 2 years ago is going to be relevant today, or how much more work am I going to have to do?
That's a very good question. And in fact, at Fielding, we just published the Handbook of Online Learning, which is the first book to emerge from it was edited by our former provost, as well as Shell and Judith, and they solicited 42 different practitioners all around the country to talk about specifically what has happened to online learning as a result of the pandemic. And it's an incredible book. Do I have it here somewhere? Oh yeah, right here. Here it's our biggest book to date.
Oh wow! Yes.
It's
Okay.
600 pages, and we're very proud of it. It's our latest book. So yes, absolutely, Sandra. What you would need to do is I would change the introduction. I would change the introduction and say, now more than ever, online is no longer a niche. It is now a dominant form of teaching, certainly in undergraduate education in the United States and North America. It is now a dominant form, even if you sign up for a residency campus, when you're on campus right now, a lot of classes are done online because it just happens to be a lot more cost effective for the faculty. So definitely rewrite your chapter 1, where you test that. And then take a look at this book, the Handbook of Online Learning, published by FUP, because we cite an enormous amount of studies. In fact, I wrote a chapter 13 on, or chapter 11, on student satisfaction. And I went through, I think, 30 studies that were done during the pandemic, about student satisfaction rates. So cite those, and then you can sort of bring your book back up to speed. There is a lot of work in your book, in your dissertation, Sandra, that is perfectly fine. That hasn't changed. The role of adjunct faculty in online universities, the conflict between online and residential faculty, all those things are wonderful, great. So I encourage you to publish it. But you do need to, at the beginning, to bring it up to speed in terms of the post-pandemic.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Lisa.
Hello. Yes. Thank you, Dr. Jean-Pierre, for the context and insight in your presentation today. And thinking about so different formats for online. I've seen there are a lot of different LinkedIn-based newsletters and connections to communities of practice and professions that might be related or interdisciplinary, and they have newsletters that sometimes connect to their books or have chapters to it that are at least released somewhat or in ebook form. Would you recommend those formats or areas overall in terms of kind of outreach in addition to some of the other resources?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, we're just, thanks to Tim DeBolt, who's wonderful, head of marketing at Fielding, we now have a LinkedIn page, website for Fielding University Press, and I'm still trying to get my feet wet in that area. But yes, LinkedIn is becoming a very important force in some of the communities of practice that our dissertations are writing about. So yes, that would be a very, very important adjunct. I should add that to my comments about podcasts and reviews. Absolutely. Any community of practice that deals with your dissertation that you can access is of value, not to publish your work, but to promote your work. I mean, and you can give little snippets away, but don't give away the store. I mean, you want to get people to buy the book, So what you could do is, as you would in a podcast, is you would do a series of brief articles where you provide a little summary of each of your chapters and sort of, whet people's appetite and reel them in that way. Absolutely, that would be a good idea. Yeah. Thank you, Lisa. Kim.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you. Thank you for everything. This is amazing. I'm trying to keep my notes at the same time as my comments. Okay, I have one comment and a question. Just to add on, dovetail off of what your feedback to Lemurium. I think everybody knows I'm a business coach and I do a lot with entrepreneurs, which was also what my dissertation was on. And I want to second the thing about podcasts and add that, podcast people, surprisingly, I think to some of us, are always looking for us. So be aggressive and assertive. A lot of my work with entrepreneurs is around marketing, and people are really afraid, to reach out and talk to people, but remember that they're also really looking. So be aggressive, look for podcasts. There's a zillion of them. And when you reach out to the podcast hosts and say, what the brief thing that, like Jean-Pierre just said, send them a little brief excerpt and tell them that you're interested. And you could get on millions of podcasts, surprisingly. So don't hesitate to reach out. I'll just add that. My question for you, Jean-Pierre, was back to, you said earlier on, before Lemurium, I forget who you were talking to, but you said we love illustrations. So could you say a little bit more about what you mean in the context of a book like this? Do you mean things like in the dissertation we had tables or charts or mind map type things? What kinds of illustrations would be great for this type of, translating our dissertation to a FUP type publication?
Yeah, absolutely. And the wonderful thing is that through print technology that exists today, you can print illustrations, even photographs, on regular print paper. For example, here is just a sample of this book. The technology has gotten to a point.
You're fine.
Where you can do photographs, you can do anything you want. In the olden days, you had to have a separate insert of glossy print paper to have photographs. That's no longer there. And so we encourage you to use illustrations as much as possible. So when the reader picks up your book, it's not such a daunting block of text. So illustrations, diagrams, figures, charts, even photographs. We did a book at Fielding University Press called Living Well, Dying Well, which is about, preparing the loved one for the death and what happens after that. And so we made the decision for each chapter, because of the sensitivity of the subject, each chapter has a photograph on the left side that shows a phase in a person's life. We did the same thing with Real Characters, which was done by Karen Shackelford, where we talk about characters that we identify with in movies and television. Now, of course, we couldn't license some of these pictures where you actually have a celebrity, or you don't want to have the legal exposure. But we found people who are dressed up as Batman. We've dressed up as Spider-Man, and we use that. So just to give a personal, an emotional connection between you and a text. And we love those things. The only thing we ask is that whatever you do, whether it's with us or with another publisher, you must be sure that you've cleared the image, that the image is available for. And the easiest way to do that is to, if you use a photograph, is to go to Shutterstock. They're very, very affordable, one of the most affordable archives that we work with, shutterstock.com. You can work with that. Or if you use graphics from a published work, that you write to the author or the publisher and say, hey, can I reproduce that particular graphic? In many cases, you do it yourself. You make your own graphics and so forth. Of course, then there is no problem. We do require that for every illustration that you use, you include a caption with the source. So we keep our nose clean legally. But we welcome as many illustrations as you can possibly add.
Okay, one last thing. So that reminds me that I do see when you talked about the not inundating people with all of the text and how that kind of breaks up the monotony. Sometimes I also see, particularly in contemporary books, nonfiction, that they have like a box or a different type of font where they've pulled some kind of a text out, or maybe they've added a little bit of a note or an example, or maybe even a reference to a web page or something. Is that appropriate for FUP?
Yeah, it's called a sidebar.
Sidebar, okay.
The term is sidebar. In some cases it is. In some cases it is. It's more of a how-to approach.
Okay.
If your book is more on the how-to level, then those sidebars are useful. Sort of to reiterate or to pull out some of the things that are really salient to your story. Otherwise, I would hesitate to do it unless there's a real specific function for it, because it does complicate the layout process, and especially you communicating to the artists how you want to do that. It's not impossible. It does create a complicating factor, and it changes the style of the book a little bit. It makes it look more like how-to-ish. If you want to do that, that's fine. Otherwise, I wouldn't recommend it.
Okay. And we don't need to know anything about InDesign.
No.
Prior to, okay.
No. You just worry about the only thing that, this is important that we're going to talk about this on the next seminar.
Okay.
But the most important thing is that you write your story on your laptop on a screen that is probably letter size, right? So your page a letter size. Remember, the book that you're going to produce is going to be pretty much 6 by 9. 6 by 9.
Okay.
So when you have large, for example, these figures that I showed you earlier, if I can find them, so when they came in first, our artists were screaming because they couldn't accommodate all those. Of course, now I can't find them, but you know what I'm talking about. These graphics were so big because the person did them in an 8 by 10 letter size laptop, and then they realized that everything has to be scaled down to 6 by 9, and then the text became so small that it's not readable. So keep in mind that everything is what's going to be scaled down. When you look at paperback, it's not going to be the same size as your letter. So keep that in mind when you plan for it.
I'm sorry, one last thing. Can you re-say, you said something about the number of pages earlier on?
Typically between 50,000 and 70,000. 50,000 to 60,000 is typically the range of your book. It doesn't have to be exactly that amount. I mean,
that's words, correct?
Yeah, words, 50,000, not words, not words with spaces. That's different. Words.
Gotcha.
As determined.
Thank you so much.
In your, let me just quickly cycle through. Anyone else with a
I appreciate it.
Hand raised, or anyone else who wants to speak up?
This has been absolutely fantastic. I've had so many direct messages thanking you and us for hosting this today. Jean-Pierre, this is just amazing. I learned a lot. Maybe someday, publish something. What I'd like to do.
Can I just say hi? Sorry, I just want to say hi, Dr. Isbouts. It's been a long time and it's wonderful, and I look forward to working with you more on this.
Absolutely, Jennifer. I look forward to it too. Great to see you.
You bet. And I just wanted to tell you I'm about to get tenure at my university. So I'm excited.
Wonderful. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Hillary.
Congratulations. Yes, yes. And real quickly before we go, I did want to make sure and acknowledge that our Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Dr. Allison Davis Whiteeyes, is also on the call. Dr. Whiteeyes, thank you so much for being here today. It's a pleasure to have you attend. So there's a lot going on in the chat. So please make sure, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording right now, and I'll go through some of my instructions if that's okay.
Look forward to seeing you on our community platform. So we'll be posting the recording. I'll be posting the slides that we used today. And then please post your proposals and we will continue the conversation that way.
Thank you, Jean-Pierre. Thank you, everybody. Hillary.
Thank
Elena.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.